So guys, I'm here at the Shamwari Wildlife Rehab Center, and it is quite amazing to see the work that they are doing here. And I want to show you guys just how amazing this building is and how profound it actually is when you walk in, because they have this walkthrough with extinction dates of various animals, and it is quite a thing when you see the names of the animals and the year that they went extinct in terms of you know, our impact on this planet. So here we have this beautiful building with a walkway, as I mentioned, with the various animals going extinct and also the year that they went extinct. So if you have a look here, in 1964 we lost the Mexican grizzly bear, and so it carries on. 1974, Japanese sea lion, and it carries on like this, guys. Let's have a look here. 1994, the ivory-billed woodpecker. And then, of course, one that really hits home for me, if we look here, in 2018, we lost the last northern white rhino, which is really what I am all about, rhino conservation. But you can't look after one species and not look after all of them. And then a very, very nice thing, as you come in, and there you guys can see me with my gimbal, you're looking into a mirror, and it is the reflection and the idea of you looking at yourself in this mirror and reflecting on the impact that us as humans have on this planet. So let's go inside and let's go and see who's waiting for us here at the Shamwari Wildlife Rehab Center. And we have little Miracle here, who is just about permanently living inside the rehab center. And I think Miracle thinks that she is a dog. Hello, Miracle. And I must just say, she is a Nyala, and she has the softest fur ever. Just absolutely gorgeous. And I'm here to meet Lisa today, so Lisa can take us to the enclosures and tell us more about rehab. And as you can see, Miracle also slobbers all over the floor.
So this room behind me, that is what we call our care room. So when animals need intensive care, put on drips or fed every 2 hours throughout the night, or just need a temporary holding facility to be taken to the hospital center the next morning, I put them in here. They have a small little outside section that you can see is sticking out, and then inside we have infrared lights, heaters, blankets, whatever they need we put in there. And then it gets really interesting in here. I've spent many after hours, sleepless nights, sweat and a lot of tears in here, until they finally hopefully graduate, where we can put them on their outside enclosure where they don't need any intensive care. So this is our buffalo enclosure, specifically designed to keep buffaloes in. So it's one of our larger enclosures with a natural vegetation and also a little mud wallow right at the back, which we can't unfortunately see. This behind me, this whole contraption, is our viewing deck. So when when guests come to the facility, we ask that everyone stands behind the viewing deck, and it's simply our way to make sure that animals do not imprint on the few guests that we do allow to come throughout the center to look at our animals. So obviously we can't see our dear old buffalo friends at the moment. Calling them is not as easy as it sounds, as we make use of specific noises when we call them. Either we use a whistle or a specific sound that we make with the physical bottles that we feed them with, which is kind of like a clicking sound. And the reason why we do that is actually to make sure that they do not associate human voices with food or pleasure, and it's just an extra measurement that we take to make sure that they do not habituate to humans. So we have Petunia, Cedric and Lulu, 3 baby buffaloes that I've had since 1 week old. Petunia, the oldest, she is now exactly 10 months old, and we're slowly starting with a weaning program, so they're down to only 2 bottles a day. We're already diluting it with water as well, until eventually we will completely cut off milk. They'll be placed in our pre-release camp, and then they will be sent back to the farms that they originally came from. So the background story: Petunia, very short and sweet. She was abandoned by her mother at 1 week old due to the drought. Resources aren't enough, so mom just simply threw her away. She definitely is the social butterfly of rehab. She has friends all over. And our buffaloes, they're one of the privileged patients to actually have access to the Greater Rehab Center when our guests leave. So we simply open the gate and they can choose, go away fly, they can choose when they would like to come out and wherever they would like to walk. This is just our way to make sure that our enclosure stays natural, full with food, natural food, and also just to kind of stimulate them to walk a bit further distances than normal and just to have a good time. So Petunia, she uses that to go and visit all of her friends at other enclosures. That's why we call her the social butterfly of rehab. Her best friend is Lulu. Lulu was 3 days old when we had to fetch him. Reason being is his mom actually gave birth to twins. And generally when wild animals give birth to twins, they only choose one. So it took her about 3 days to determine which one she's going to keep. And then Lulu was the unfortunate one who got kicked away. We physically had to drive out to the farm where he came from, physically drive into the buffalo herd living on the edge, grab him, throw him on the back, and then drive out as fast as you can. So in rehab, you definitely do some interesting stuff. But Lulu has been such a treat to work with. He's one of my favorites. So he does get spoiled a lot. And then last but not least, we have dear old Cedric. Now Cedric arrived at 1 month old with not a single blade of hair on his head, completely bald as can get. The sun was shining off of his head. Now, as funny as it is to have a bald baby buffalo, the reason for it is quite sad. So within a drought, it's very common, resources aren't enough, the food quality and quantity is very low. So your females, the moms, their bodies go into survival mode. So what often happens is they stop producing milk without knowing it. So Cedric spent the entire 24 hours a day suckling on mom, and how he suckles, it actually rubs off all the hair from his head. Fortunately, it only takes 6 weeks to grow back, so we no longer have a bald baby buffalo anymore. Doesn't get teased anymore, and I'm sure he's very happy about that. So all 3 of these buffaloes, they come from reserves around Shamwari, and they will be sent back after they've graduated from rehab, and we'll take them back ourselves. In there we have our 2 sables. We have Ntombi, which means little girl, and never mind, Enclosure, but I didn't want to do the Xhosa. Okay, we have Ntombi and Duchess, and they're both sables, come from reserves around Shamwari due to the fact that mom was unable to produce enough milk. We've seen a lot of animals that cope with that problem. This drought has been really severe on all your females because the food quality and quantity is not what it's supposed to be. So their bodies, they can't keep up until eventually they start drying up, and unfortunately their young suffers due to it. So we have 3 female meerkats. Our newest one being that one looking at us, her name's Pandy. She arrived 2 weeks ago and she's already the alpha of their little mob, which is always amazing to see how their different personalities just click with the entire group. So all of our meerkats, they either confiscated from legal authorities as being kept as illegal house pets, or simply surrendered because the people no longer can either look after them or have them as illegal pets. So unfortunately, meerkats in South Africa, they sometimes very unfortunate, being found abandoned next to the road or in the veld, then they kept and raised as house pets. Now what people often miss is their natural personalities. They very curious animals, but very protective. So their behavior often is so difficult to have as a normal house guest, house pet, because of how protective they are. They have one alpha, and they'll do whatever it takes to actually protect that alpha. So whether it be a baby, a house guest, a pet coming close to the one that they see as the dominant figure, they'll do whatever it takes to just protect them, and usually they react with aggression. So very quickly they either kick to the curb or release next to the side of the road. But what people don't understand is that's actually a death sentence because of their social structure. They have a big mob or a colony, whatever you'd like to call it. They have one alpha and then a ranking order. So they fight amongst each other to see which one is the second runner-up. Granny, grandpa, uncle, everyone has their spot. And when you introduce a new member to established group, then they rip each other to pieces. They'll shred that individual, so you'll just see fluff. So that is the difficult thing with rehabilitating meerkats. You have to allow them enough time to establish their own colony mob, and you have to have physically enough individuals so that the structure of the group can be similar to a mob. You have to release that entire group as a unit into the reserve or wherever for it to be a successful release. So this individual, her name is Pandy. She is the current alpha of our very tiny meerkat mob of our wildlife rehab center. Their enclosure is natural enough so they can find their own natural insects, bugs, worms within the enclosure itself. But once a day we do give a little bit of supplementary food, which is a big variation of eggs, insects, worms, to even fruit and vegetables. As you can see, she's very curious, but highly dangerous. Believe me, if you try and enter, she'll definitely show you who's boss. So as the alpha, she feels it's her responsibility to protect the other two individuals, which is why she'll do an entire threat display, puff herself up, make her look slightly bigger, more dangerous, to give you the impression that she is protecting them and you will not be able to reach them without dealing with her. Behind me we have our elephant enclosure. It used to be home to Stella and Amara, our two elephant girls, both found as orphans. And if you would actually want to look closer, you can see right at the back that black structure that is Stella and Amara's room where they slept every night, and the little Wendy house next door is where the caretakers slept every night to feed them every 3 hours. So straight throughout the night and the very next day, it's honestly being a mom way before you plan to be a mom, but it's what elephants require. So elephant rehabilitation, it's one of your lengthiest, trickiest programs of all the animals possibly that we are working with. So your general elephant rehab program is roughly about 13 years. Amara and Stella, it's now been a 5-year program, and it's going absolutely perfectly. They are currently in our pre-release camp. So it is our way of making sure that they get their needed exercise in, and also just learn how to be a little bit more independent, to grow as individual elephants until they're physically big enough, strong enough to be released back into the wild. So Amara, she came in first. She was found at 3 months old as a tiny, malnourished, anorexic elephant. And what makes her background story so unique is because she actually came looking for us. So our anti-poaching unit, who patrols the reserve every single day and night, the particular officer was patrolling the area, and he noticed that there's this tiny little 3-month-old elephant following him around like he was mom. So upon assessing her, he noticed that he can see every bone sticking out in her body. She's extremely malnourished. So obviously our vet was called to the scene, and they made the decision to take Amara in, and she's been with us ever since. So with Amara, she's been a really difficult patient because she's kind of like lactose intolerant. When we gave her milk, her stomach will swell up and then she'll have very bad runny diarrhea. And we think that might be a reason as to why mom possibly could have abandoned her. We believe this problem is not genetically carried over, but it's more maybe an enzyme deformity or a physical deformity inside her stomach that has problems with physically digesting milk itself. So our saving grace is the fact that Amara never stopped fighting for her life. We received a few months later, 6 to be exact, another elephant orphan called Stella. I think Stella was definitely our angel sent from above, because they formed such a unique bond that it's as if their survival almost depends on each other. So Amara, she's now 5 years old, a big girl, no more milk, definitely no more standing up every 3 hours to make sure they're alright. So thank the Pope, we have our nightlife back. And she's really developing as an individual elephant, every day just moving one step closer to her final release date, which yes, it will be onto Shamwari when the time comes. Hopefully we're now halfway with their final release date, and the thing that makes it so difficult is they need to be integrated back into the herd of elephants itself, and that is why elephant rehabilitation is such a long, lengthy program. We have established a bond with them, kind of mimic their tiny little elephant herd. We are part of their family, and as much as we are hands off with all of our animals, with elephant rehabilitation, it's exactly the opposite. You have to meet their emotional needs for it to be a successful rehab program. Elephants mourn themselves to death very quickly. That's also why it's so important to us to make sure that Stella and Amara, they stay with each other for the rest of their life. Stella comes from a neighboring reserve, about 2 hours drive from here. She was brought in at 2 months old, exactly 6 months after Amara had arrived, and they are like sisters. So if Amara for some reason would have died, or Stella vice versa, within 1 month of their separation, the other would die from a broken heart. And that is how intense it is working with elephants. You become their family. It's a lifestyle. But I think that's also one of your most amazing things working with elephants. It's a massive privilege being able to relate with animals as amazing as they are. So now with their rehab program, I would say it's very successful where they are now within their lives as young elephant toddlers. Very naughty, very cheeky. They steal, break, throw tantrums and bully, believe me. But they're just amazing individuals, and we're looking very forward to their final release date, which will hopefully be in another few years.